So sometimes to re-figure out where all the features are. So the meeting is now being recorded. And I had my screen muted, so I didn't hear anything if anybody did say anything. So, all right, let's go. Okay, quiet quitting. That's why we're here. We're going to chat about this today for the next 45-ish minutes. And we'll have some questions and answers. Again, I encourage you to ask questions along the way, as well as there'll be time for that at the end as well. So a little disclaimer that any information that we use is found from stuff that we found out. Sometimes we do more data driven. This one is more leadership driven than this is just the disclosure of everybody's situation is different, and we're giving professional advice on a global scale, not on an individual scale. If you want to engage us to look at your situation directly, then we can have some one-on-one time. So your individual results may vary. There is no one fixes all formula. So snuck through there. All right. Okay, so first, who am I and what is Light Consulting? For those of you who are unfamiliar, my name is Sarah West. I'm the owner and founder of Light Consulting. We've been in business for almost 4 years now. That's crazy to think about. We have a team of 10 now, so we have a couple new faces since this picture has been taken. And the bulk of what we do is fractional CFO work. So we work with mid and large or small and mid-sized organizations on their accounting and finance services. We also do some strategic planning. I do executive coaching. I work with senior leadership teams on their strategy. So it can look a little bit different. Toy, our newest team member, has been here about 5 weeks, and she said, I just didn't realize all of the things you do. And why that is because we're just here to help. So sometimes our business owners, our clients, have needs that are outside of the scope of the finance world. And if we have that expertise and or know somebody who has it, we will connect them and make things happen. So let's jump in. Quiet quitting. What is this and why does it matter? So the reason I wanted you guys to come off camera is because the first thing that I want to do is kind of gauge the room. So if you have a piece of paper in front of you and a pen, I want you to grab it because I'm going to ask you 5 questions. And I want you to answer it in 2 ways. First, think about it from your perspective. Do I behave in this way? And then the second, yes or no. So that's a yes or no. Do I behave in this way? And then the second one would be, am I observing behavior on my team in this way? So yes or no to, am I behaving this way? Yes or no to, am I observing these things on my team? So the 5 questions are, the first one is, am I going through the motions? Am I showing up to my job and just going through the motions? So are you doing that? Yes or no? Are you observing that in others? Yes or no? Question number 2. In the last 3 months, have I increased my pushback in the organization yourself? And then from your team, have you seen and observed an increased amount of pushback in your organization? Question number 3 is, has my productivity decreased over the last 3 months? And since we're basically at the end of the March, you can think about the last 3, and it's not winter, just kidding, it's winter. So has your productivity decreased over the last 3 months? And then have you observed a decrease in productivity in the last 3 months? The 4th question is, have I taken more sick days in the last 3 months? And has my team taken more sick days in the last 3 months? And then the final question is there have I increasingly been tardy, and or since you understand yourself more than maybe others, have I found it harder to get to work on time with a positive attitude in the last 3 months? And then from the team perspective, are you witnessing and experiencing a tardiness problem that didn't exist before that does now? So I'm going to stop sharing just so I can see everybody's faces. So on the individual side, and I don't know any of your bosses, I probably do, but I won't share. This is just truth telling here. On the individual side, how many of you have answered at least one of those as yes? Okay. On the team experience side, how many of you have answered one of those with 2 or more? Okay, so this is a real thing. You guys are experiencing that. Great. Then we can solve real problems that do exist, not just exist in our mind and or exist in the media, because they tend to like to do that and tell us that there's problems, and they do exist. Okay, now I gotta figure out how to go back to screen sharing and presenting. Share, present. Okay, so why does this matter to you and your organization? So it scared me a couple of weeks ago. We did Finance Simplified on March 1st, which is an all-day course. We ended up having to do it virtually versus in person because of the weather. And Mandy at Bushel said something that scares me a lot. And I don't know if I'm going to accept it or if I'm going to try to do everything that I can to create a different path, which was the workforce that we now employ is only going to stay in their organization from 1 to 3 years. So it used to be 5 to 7. Now she's saying, stats are saying that those probably is going to be 1 to 3. And rather than fight it, we as leaders of organizations have to understand how to work differently so that we can still thrive as an organization, but have a more transient workforce. As far as people coming in and going. And I'm going to go ahead and not believe that for a little bit. Since I have a baby company with 10 employees, I have a little bit more control than larger organizations. So the things that we're going to talk about today, because most of our clients are small to mid-sized businesses. So what's a small business? A small business, I think the SBA would say it's under 500 employees, which 500 employees feels like a really big business, but somewhere in there, 200 less, I feel like you have a lot more control over your organization than some of those other things. So it matters to you because turnover is expensive. It costs your organization anywhere from 20 to 100% of that person's 1-year comp to switch that person out, have them leave, have a gap, recruit somebody else, train them up. And the time frame in which you do that is also really, the train up time. Sorry, Drew was texting me. I was just making sure that I was recording, and so that distracted me for a minute. But so that time frame to get somebody trained up, like if we're going to lose them every year, you barely even know what you're doing in a year. And so in the accounting finance world where we live, you got to go through a couple cycles before you even know. So that's why this matters. That's why quiet quitting matters, is because we want our employees and our team members to stay engaged, and Reengage especially are high performers. So this stuff is very important. And those things that are signs of quiet quitting, again, let's just define what quiet quitting is, because the word itself kind of feels a little bit false because they're not actually quitting. What in quiet quitting, what they're doing is they're becoming disengaged. So they're not as excited about work. They're not as excited about the mission and where the organization is going. So some of these other behaviors are showing up. There's also this thing that's going on where what I originally thought of when I hear the words quiet quitting is people who are just all of a sudden dissatisfied and leave. And there is some of that going on too. And this is a result of a few different things. So we have this generational change in organizations where we are adding 220,000 jobs a month in the US. Guess what? We did not have 220,000 babies 20 years ago that are graduating on a monthly basis. So we didn't have enough kids a long time ago to backfill the baby boomer generation. And then with hyper consumerism, where we have to have all of the things, we now have to create all of the things, and we don't have as many bodies to do that because of the generational shift in the baby boomers leaving the workforce, this next generation coming into the workforce, which the generational understanding is, it's not straight up math. It's like, let's call it marketing math, where you just make stuff up. So because you can say the millennials are the biggest generation, well, okay, because the years in which you're spanning are larger than the other generations' years in which you're spanning. And from a generational perspective and understanding that, what shifts a generation and kind of a cutoff is usually a life event. So whether it was 9/11 or JFK or the wars that existed, or coming out of the Great Depression, those who lived through the Great Depression were called the greatest generation. And then they had all the baby boomers, they had all the babies so that they could self-sustain their own thing because they knew what it was like to not have anything. And as we progress through these generational shifts, all these things are going to change in the way that we behave. And it's not like this generation's better than that generation. It's not about that. It's about what we are doing today to work with what we have. So we can't blame people for wanting to take more vacation, to do the things, to have a better work-life balance, because the great reset that happened with COVID is now people are reevaluating their values, where they want to spend their time, how much time they want to dedicate to work versus home. So we are going to have that. And that's what's happening with quiet quitting, is I'm reevaluating what I am doing. So before I might have been giving 110%. Now I'm only giving 80% because I don't want to work past 5 o'clock, because my family is more important than my work. And breeding a culture that accepts that and understands that is a healthy thing. It's probably the differentiating factor that if you get ahead of it, you're gonna do well in this next 10 years. So signs of quiet quitting are those 5 things that I asked about. Are people just going through the motions? Do you see decreased productivity and pushback that when they were normally cooperative? Have they stopped taking initiative, raising their hand for work? And are they coming in late and taking more personal or sick days? So those are signs of disengagement. So they can call it quiet quitting. It's also known as disengagement. So we're going to talk about what you can do to fix that. But the results of those behaviors are now this manager-employee relationship is strained. And why that is, we have a solution to that. It's really about having feedback in the moment. You have dissatisfaction on your team, somebody who's not pulling the weight that they used to pull, and or doesn't have the same level of expectation as before. And a lot of times, especially in large organizations where they depend on manual labor, they're like, well, we just have to tolerate the behavior because we need a body. Well, and that just creates a lot of toxicity in the organization. And that's a choice. You can choose that. That's not the wrong choice. It's just a choice. And then these are some of the results that come with that. And there might be more conflict and potential disengagement from the other employees. So whether they voice it or not is really important. So here's a stat that Drew found in researching for this webinar, is what are the main reason, because what we see is an increase in boundaries, like I'm not going to work past 5, or I'm not going to work in the weekends. And those things are totally normal and totally fine as long as we're continuing to get the work done and still being engaged while we're at work. So we do got to come to work. And one of those things would be the highest respondent was feeling burned out, and they're really putting up those boundaries because they think that that's going to stop it. And when we look at human psychology and organizational behavior, it's less about like the amount of time that you're doing, and it's more about the quality of work you're doing. So if you're asked to do something, if you're in a position that doesn't feed your soul, that is where you're going to get burned out. If you're in a role that is meant for you, it's how God wired you to be, then you're actually going to feel energized by doing those things. So us as leaders, and if you're a leader in your organization, I really encourage you to think about right people, right seat, and that being a very important role or job in your organization, is making sure that the right people are in the right seats and they have the tools to be successful. That's how you prevent burnout. That's how you prevent a lot of these things that are showing up here. And then what activities are where they're reducing their efforts in. So the number one thing is conferences. So one, COVID stopped that. So we didn't have those things going on for a period of time. And now we are going to re-engage those experiences and those learning opportunities and stuff. And you can see a shift in there. Like I used to go to a conference a month or do site visits on a regular basis. And now I'm just putting some of those back into my calendar, but not all of them, or whatever that looks like. And you can see that older generation really pulling back the most on some of those things. So let's go to solutions, because that's my favorite part. So there's 3 things that you can do to combat disengagement, to stop quiet quitting. And they're really all kind of soft things, but we also have some tactical tools we're going to share with you. So mission, vision, values, and what is important about those is inspiration and integrity. So we'll dig into that. The second thing is continuous feedback. So why these people are being disengaged, why they show up tardy, is nobody's calling them out on them and holding them accountable, and that's a healthy thing. So provide safety and confront conflict. And then the third thing is developing career mapping, really investing in your people, showing them that there is a way. So right now we're in this highly competitive market for people. We're in the market of labor. So we have to find people, we have to differentiate ourselves from different organizations to really attract the people that align with our mission and core values. And we have to show them that we care about them and we invest them. And those could be the differentiators, because we're not going back and having babies 20 to 25 years ago. We have to deal with the population, the supply of labor that we currently have. So mission, vision, values. I know that everybody's like, oh, I think we have these. Well, if you don't have them, I would really encourage you to go through the exercise to get them. And if you do have them, I would encourage you to use them often. So whether that is reciting your mission statement at the beginning of every team meeting, whether that is having mission moments as part of your team meeting. If you're using the traction model, that can be used as your segue. How did we live out our mission in this last week, or since we met last? Governor Burgum used to use that at Great Plains. He used to stop a meeting if they started to not quite solve a problem and say, how have we done XYZ mission this week? And if nobody can come up with an answer, he'd say, well, what are we doing here? Everybody get back to work till you have a mission moment to share. Values, making sure you're living by those. We're going to talk about that in integrity. But the main reason that this stuff matters is because we want to get hyped up. The best way to engage people is to draw their attention to the things that you are doing and be excited about it. So if you're a leader of your organization, your not number one job, but in your top 5 is being a cheerleader for the organization and making sure that everybody understands where we're going, because it matters. You have to have your why. So that's your mission. You have to have your why, and people need to believe in that, because they get to choose every day to wake up and they choose to come work with you. You wake up every day and you choose to go to work. So you have to have that mission. You have to be excited about it, and you have to continually communicate that. So now we've just leveled. So given that we have these fun things that have all of these entertainment options, whether it's Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, even on LinkedIn, right? We're like, we don't want to read words anymore, and we want to be entertained. Like, and whether it's you as an individual, or if we're just talking about population as a whole, is we want to be entertained. And I know this because I have clients who literally make money off of entertaining people. And you have to think about that from a leader perspective. How do I get you fired up? Lindsay's on here. Lindsay is a client of ours, and we talked about coaching yesterday, and I was role playing with them. Like, if I'm in the sales seat, this is how I'm talking to you. And I'm talking to you in a very motivating way, because I want you to buy my product, because my product's going to change your life. And you have to learn how to communicate in those skills if you're a leader of the organization, because you have to inspire people to behave differently. So I went on a website that I stumbled upon this when we were doing research for core counts on. Stanford Health is a pillar in our community. They are the number one, or the only trauma certified from Minneapolis to Seattle or something like that. So they're a big deal. They employ a lot of people. They're definitely in the top 10 employers in the far-wide region. So when I was doing core value work and understanding how organizations behave and what do they put out there, I was pleasantly surprised, because I'm a lady of faith, that this is their mission, vision, and core values. And what is also interesting, and I'm not gonna pick on this, because I don't experience them besides from a consumer perspective, and thank God that I've been very healthy, so I haven't had to experience them from a consumer perspective. But like, no, I don't know that anybody would have guessed that their mission is dedicated to sharing God's love through the work of health, healing, and comfort. I would guess that maybe people didn't know that. So that's why I shared it. It's because it surprised me, but it's also super inspiring. So let's shout that from the rooftops. Let's do that. So inspiration, number one thing to engage people, get them fired up, learn how to do voice inflection, to do all the things that get people fired up. And it can be, we'll get into the how do we individualize that in lesson 3, or in solution 3. The second thing under mission, vision, and core values is integrity. So why I use lights in here is because we have some aspirational values. So we exist to make business and life light for our clients. And then we have our 5 core values. Now, if I just said that these are our core values and we live by them every day, that would 100% be a lie. We do not love like Jesus every day. For those of you who are followers or understand what that means, that bar is impossible to reach. So that's an aspirational value. We also we're pretty intentional most of the time, but sometimes we miss the mark there. We give grace a lot. We give grace to our clients a lot, to our team members. We don't give grace to ourselves very well. Help others 100%. I can say that everybody in this organization has a helping mentality. That one's at our core. And that trusts that anything is possible. We also do believe that. Toya's been here for, like I said, 5 weeks, and she's doing crazy stuff that she never thought she could do. Like, it's just amazing. She's like, I don't have any training in this. I'm like, it's fine. We'll just figure it out. No big deal. So anything is possible, even in accounting. So why this matters when it comes to engaging your employees. So if I said we did these things 100% of the time, and I didn't show up that way every day, which is very difficult to show up the same way and in congruence with your core values on a daily basis, then I wouldn't be living in integrity. And that is super important as we're trying to inspire people, is to do those things. So I guess I don't know if you guys see each other when I'm sharing the screen, probably not. So one thing that is one of my favorites is give grace, because we live in a weird time, and you have to give grace for people, because either do they know what even the right answer is? Was I cleared expectations? All of the things. And you want to be extended grace in your times of need. So I would encourage everyone to adopt a little bit of grace in these, well, always just do it for life. No stopping, just do it forever. But so inspiration, integrity, have your core mission, core values, and vision defined. If you don't, if you use the EOS model, the traction model, I would encourage you to, that's pretty simple how they do it. They have like a 2-page work business plan, go through it, get your team, buy them some pizzas, maybe even a beer, and get brainstorming on where do we want to go? Why do we even show up to work, right? Because even if you don't have it written, you probably have it in here. So let's put it to paper, let's live it out, and let's do it with integrity. The second how is continuous feedback. And what this does is it provides safety, and it also is, the other check mark is to be able to confront conflict. So although we're accountants by trade, a lot of my work is on leadership and working with senior leaders. And if everybody would just give feedback in the moment, most of the problems would not exist. So and I even do this as a leader, and I got to experience this yesterday. We had a little miscommunication yesterday that somebody then was upset and vocalized that, and I wasn't in the room. So I'm catching up on this late in the evening, and the person who's in charge of those employees now, she handled it. She had intimate one-on-one conversations about the behavior, dealt with it in the moment, versus putting it under the rug and maybe dealing with it later, or probably not dealing with it at all. And then if I do deal with it later, now it's weird because you don't know what I'm talking about. Like, let's just not do any of that. Let's just deal with it. And why that provides safety, when we talk about safety in this case, it's about psychological safety. So it's not about like, we have to have a physical safe location for our people to go where they don't feel physically threatened, but the psychological safety is really where we're going to get people to get through disengagement and into engagement. So I found these little circles online. So if you Google it, don't worry, this will probably be in your top 5 images of psychological safety. But why I put this on here is we make so many excuses to avoid conflict. So many excuses, like, oh, I don't want to hurt their feelings, or I don't want to do this, or I don't want to do that. At the end of the day, you actually are hurting them by not confronting the issue. You're hurting them, you're hurting yourself. Now it's keeping you up at night because you're worried about the conversation that you didn't have because you should have had it 2 weeks ago. And now 5 more things have happened, and now I have to have a more difficult conversation. Let's just stop. Let's just stop doing that. Let's pick on the things, not pick on them. Let's pick up them and deal with them when they present themselves, so they don't become this mountainous thing going on. And what I say, if you are working on getting the courage to have a conversation with somebody, whether it's a peer, whether it's your boss, or whether it's a direct report, if you're feeling that, the chances that they're feeling that are nearly 100%. So if there's a tension there and you're avoiding it because you don't want to deal with it, or you think they're going to react in a certain way, they're feeling that too. And guess what? Leaders go first. So if you want to solve your problems in your relationships, whether that's personal or professional, you're going to have to take this step, and you're going to have to create that safety and say, this situation bothered me and I would like to talk about it. keep your cool, don't lose your cool. Understanding personalities is helpful too, because then you can say, okay, they're going to respond assertive aggressive, they're going to withdraw, and knowing those things is helpful for those conversations. That's some of the equipping you can do as a leader to move through that. But you have to go first. You have to show that you can have an organization where we deal with conflict. Ramsey Solutions, which is out of Nashville, so I'm sure you've heard the name Dave Ramsey because he's kind of a big deal as far as like his popularity and stuff. So they've won the best place to work for like 11 years in a row in Nashville. And the reason that they do is they don't allow people to talk about other people. And is that what my next thing is? Oh yeah, our favorite conflict resolution tools. So they don't allow that to exist. So if you talk, who's on my screen right now, I have Carla, Hope, and Jenna. So if I'm talking to Carla about problems I'm having with Jenna, that's not helpful. Now I've created more toxicity in my organization. I am not solving the problem. Carla can't solve Jenna's behavioral problems. Like that's just not even going to be the way that it is, right? So the only person who can work through that is me and Jenna. So we have to have that conversation. So our top 5 conflict resolution tools, and Melissa and I are both conflict resolution certified. But it doesn't mean we like conflict. It just means we like conflict so little that we need more tools in our toolbox to be able to deal with it. So don't be like, oh my gosh, they're so good at conflict. It's more about how do we make this less scary, because it's super scary regardless of who you are. Some people are naturally a little bit better at it. It had to be a learned trait for Melissa and I. And guess what? We still get it wrong sometimes too. That's where the grace comes in. So our 5 favorite things is Matthew 18. So that's just out of the Bible. He tells you exactly that. Jesus literally says, if you have a conflict with somebody, you go to the person. And then if that doesn't get solved, then you go to the person with one other, and then you just do it that way. And you do not go to somebody else about the conflict with somebody else. So making sure that you're keeping those things in check. If that got followed in every organization, I would say that of the conflict conversations that I have, and I don't know if God's like, hey, guess what? We equipped you with this, so now we're going to face you with all these things you get to talk people through, or what he's doing, but it's been a very apparent lately. And the reason that those exist and the reason that they become these big things is because people are not going to the person that they are in conflict with. They're not addressing the issues. And conflict doesn't have to be a big thing. Like the thing yesterday was actually, and I'm just going to be totally transparent with my team. So Betsy had a kid at home sick, so she wasn't available. The person who asked or requested something of her didn't know that. But she didn't push back. She didn't say, you know what, I'm actually not at the office, so I can't print those 100 copies and get them to you at the hotel for your presentation in 30 minutes. So now we created this disruption because she wasn't comfortable with that. So that's a learning for her. It's a learning for us to create a safe space to where people can push back and feel okay disclosing that you're home with your sick child. She wants to appease us and please us, so she chose not to. But we need to create a space, and we need to deal with it in the moment, because if we let that go and then we say, oh, we're just going to write that down in annual review time, we're going to bring out all these things that you do wrong, that feels gross. That's not good. And now you are creating an employee who's then going to could disengage. Okay, so Matthew 18, go to the person. Any personality profiles are helpful. So understanding how they're going to behave and respond to conflict is super helpful, because then you are more in control of the conversation. So the Enneagram is one that actually discloses, based on your type, how you will respond to conflict. So an Enneagram 8, which I get to be married to, Chad is an Enneagram 8, the challenger. His response to conflict is assertive aggressive, and which is totally fine. Guess what? Now that I know that, I'm like, I don't have to say, stop yelling at me. I can be like, oh, I triggered something here. Let me turn the temperature down. And I'm sorry that I made you feel like I've made you they're also their trigger point is being vulnerable, so, or out of control. So if I make Chad feel out of control, whoop, there we go, assertive aggressive, let's see it. And mine is compliant. So knowing those things where I'll be like, fine, I'll just do it, and I won't even, blah. That's really healthy for a relationship. So knowing those things really equips you to have more healthy conflict. Actually, Melissa and I got to do this today because we have a fairly important decision to make, and she's a P, which is part of Myers-Briggs. The fourth letter of the Myers-Briggs is P or J, and I'm a J, which I like closure. I like things to go according to plan. I like to be in control. If the plan, like, I like to be on time, all those things. And she's more flexible and dynamic. It doesn't really like to come to closure, and I'm like forcing closure on this issue. You don't do it, I'm never going to talk to you again. That's what I'm saying in my head. But because we're business partners, which means we have to be together forever, we decided to work through that. And we basically said, Melissa, the reason that this is a bigger issue than it should be is because you've been acting, your P's been coming out for the last 3 months and you haven't been addressing the issue. I'm trying to force this now because my J is very fed up with the penis. And yes, we say that, and it's funny, and it's okay. So we just got to have that conversation. Like, we're just different people coming at it differently. So what is a great space in which we both can thrive? And learning personality types is super helpful. Honor, educate, direct is one of the simplest conflict resolution tools. So if you have a situation where you need to have a crucial conversation, which is a book, the last two are books, so go ahead and put those on your Amazon list. But honor, educate, direct, I've used this in some pretty serious high-level senior leadership conflicts. And what that means is honor people where they're at. They're upset, or they're bringing you an issue because it means something to them, right? So honor that. If you dismiss that, this is not going to go well, because if you dismiss that, their wall is now here and they're not going to listen to you. So you have to honor them, educate them on why we can't do X, Y, Z, why this is important, why we made the choice that we made, and then direct them in where are we going to go from here? What is the acceptable behavior going forward? And can you repeat back to me what you heard? So then you're also mirroring. So it's not just one-way conversation, and you bring them in so that you guys can be crystal clear leaving in that conversation. Brene Brown often says clear is kind, not often, always says clear is kind, and that is so true. And that honor, educate, direct model is super helpful. So whenever people want to talk on conflict resolution, we usually do something around there because it's 3 words, you can remember it. If you go to direct, like because I said so, that doesn't go over well. So don't do that. If you just start to educate and then direct, like, here's all the reasons why, this is why we're doing it, you're doing it this way, that also doesn't go over well. So that honor piece is very important in that order. Yeah, it's fun. It's actually pretty magical to see this thing, that process go through. Okay, the third how, career development and mapping. So there's been a white paper article out there, it's about 48 pages, I think, about the employment drought. So the fact that we just don't have as many people in the workforce than we used to. And I'm like, oh, this just gives you 48 pages of data. What's the solution? There's like 1 page of solution. And the solution was like, just be better than everybody else, so people want to work for you, because that's super easy. Where everybody's like, I just want the quick fix. Like, if I buy this technology, then therefore everybody will want to come work for me and not anybody else. But it's not, I guess, that easy. So here is a way you can differentiate yourself, especially you guys in small business. And actually, if you just lead people, you can do this, because you don't need to have permission to have great conversations with your team members. I would encourage you to do that regardless if your organization lets you, like requires you or not. These are just things that you should do. So invest in their future and show them the way. So what does that mean? So one thing, so when you offer people jobs and you probably do a comp sheet, right? So that if they're really looking, they can say, because it's not just salary to salary, there's benefits that are different. There's the cultural things, but they won't know that when they're accepting an offer. It's you've spent maybe 2 to 4 hours together. They're not going to be able to say, yes, that's the culture that I want. Maybe they can. But when we're trying to compare apples and apples on a piece of paper from salary to maybe a phone stipend, health insurance, well, how much of the health insurance do you cover? Because that's a huge number and can be a big differentiator. But I would encourage you to include a line item on there that is professional development or learning or whatever that is, and giving every employee, and it can be a different dollar amount based on their position, a bucket of money, whatever that looks like, to invest in themselves. So whatever that looks like for your organization, whatever you can swing, I would encourage you to do that. And why that is because, and then as managers, we need to tell them, so what are you doing with your $2,000 of continuing education money this year? You can use it for an advanced degree. You can use it for Harvard Business School online and say you went to Harvard, right, Drew? You can use it for whatever that looks like, and then giving them freedom in a framework. So now they get to make a decision on how they spend their money. I mean, you got to put a little bit of parameters on there, right? So, but maybe not. Maybe if they want to do something different in their career. So like Bryce on my team, he wants to run like a real estate investment firm someday, which, I mean, accounting matters in that because that's a piece of it. But if he wants to use his money to learn how to do real estate development, which isn't directly tied today, guess what? That's okay. Because Bryce won't leave me if I'm investing in Bryce. And maybe we get to be a part of that and be magically something different in the future. That's the fun and nimbleness of small business. So invest in their future and show them the way. This is, so Drew gets to be on here because she's on here. So I get to disclose all of her favorite things. But so annual learning investment, like I said, there's a few on here. I verbalized a couple of them. The chamber leadership program's great. 35 under 35 is amazing. Industry specific learning, do that. Whatever it is, just kind of give them a dollar amount and say, go crazy, and then hold them to it. Because I also have super fiscally conservative people on my team, and they're like, I don't want to spend the money. And I'm like, you have to spend the money. You have to grow. You have to grow and learn. So those are some learning investment opportunities. So everybody on my team gets $2,000 a year to do whatever they want. And then the roadmap that we have on there, that's just started. So this kind of came from some of the, I was on a webinar about succession planning, and I can't remember what organization it was, but they shared their path. I think they called it a path. So from a laborer to CEO, it wasn't quite that robust, but what are all the paths, all the things you need to do to advance in your career? And yesterday at Intentional Collisions put on by the Chamber, great event, a few younger people that sat with me asked those, were looking for those type of things. I want somebody who's really going to invest in me. I want to know what I can be in 5 years, and I want to see it. Like, they're so visual now, like just talking in concept, it's not gonna resonate. Why it can resonate for us who have been in the business for, like me, 20 years, is because I've seen it. But if I'm just fresh out of college and I don't know, like I don't know what is the next step. And if we're not gonna have conversations about it, then maybe some other organization will have conversations about it and invest in me. So I don't have a lot on here as far as this, because this is something that we're working on, and as an organization to put this together, this roadmap. But for instance, the reason that I got to keep Drew, or one of the reasons, I'm sure there's many, Drew, and Drew can speak to this, despite her move from the Fargo-Moorhead market to the Minneapolis market, and she doesn't do accounting. I know she would love to do accounting in the Minneapolis market, but we're going to go ahead and say no to that right now, right, Drew? Is because we shifted her role. So like Bryce, we have a 5-year plan to get him out of accounting and into real estate investments. For Drew, she's not 100% clear on what her path is, but she knows she wants to learn a lot and she loves community and the entrepreneurial space. So we're just going to expose her to as much of that. She's still adding a ton of value to our business in the rules, but we can play, we can do those things. Again, a smaller organization is more nimble. A lot of your organizations that are on here today are nimble as well. The fallacy that we have is that we can't do things. Yes, you can. Yes, you can. Let's obey the law, and then everything else is great, right? So I would encourage you guys to think about, what do my employees want and how do I get them there? And it's okay if that's not here, because I would rather pour into you to prepare you for your dream and know that your dream is not here, and in 5 years you're going to be moving on to do whatever that dream is. I'd rather know that and help prepare you for that than in 5 years you say, here's my 2 weeks notice, it's been real. Like, let's just not do that. Let's just have those open conversations, and that roadmap might even be a road right out of the door, and that's okay. Let's just embrace that. A couple other things that we do as far as leading into our people is the word of the year. So everybody picks a word, we blow it up on social media, share those things, and focus on that. What the long term, what's your dream? We talked about that, and then developing the roadmap. This other sheet here, this is Drew's pretty face, Drew's partner Kelly, her family, those things that are important to her, her word of the year, favorite nonprofit, favorite like morning beverage, maybe there's an alcoholic beverage on there, other things that she likes to do. And why these are so important to me as a leader is because if I want to reward Drew or love on her, I can just go to that sheet and I don't have to remember everybody's favorite coffee drink, right? Because now it's here, and I don't, because that's a lot to remember. And that, why would we do that? So that's what I got. We got some chat questions. I'm going to pull off this share here, pull up the chat, and Drew sent me one that she had before. So, all right, mic's off. Okay, so while I ask these questions that already came in, you guys can think about what your question would be. True. Okay. As a coworker, you notice a peer who is quiet quitting. How would you address the situation? So given what we learned today, how would you address the situation? You guys can answer. This is the test.
So one of the things I'm really working on this year is being like, so what's with the attitude?
Calling it out.
As someone who doesn't love conflict, right? But just like trying to approach our staff with, you're off today, what's with the attitude? And sometimes it makes them aware that they're like, they've got the attitude.
That they're bringing attitude, yeah.
Yeah. But sometimes that's just enough to get people re-engaged in the day anyway, in the moment.
Yeah, and then Jenna, from a personality profile, do you have anybody retreat when you use that language? Or Totally. Yep. Yeah.
I have a couple criers on my team, so that happens.
Yes. Does that create an opportunity for you guys to have then a more engaging conversation?
Yeah, because then I can be like, okay, so let's talk about the tears. Like, let's talk about, are we mad? Are we sad? Are we stressed? What's going on outside of work that could be coming into work? I think a lot of times in those situations, it's what's going on outside, but we have to show up to work. And sometimes it's just hard to separate the two.
We cannot shut off our humanness when we walk the door.
Nope.
Love it. Address it in the moment. Any other things, coworkers that are quiet quitting, how do you deal with that? Let's say if it's a peer.
I think of Sarah, if it's a peer, opening up the conversation to someone that is their supervisor that works with them, just to kind of make known, like, hey, I've noticed so and so kind of seems distant. I've done that with other team members for their direct reports, just to be like, you might want to check in and just see how things are going, grab lunch, have a conversation, those sorts of things. So maybe not quite as direct as Jenna was talking about, but if it's more of just like a subtle notice, I might kind of ping one of my other coworkers to check in on them, somebody who's closer to them than I might be, if I'm not able to have that conversation.
Yeah, so recognizing that, not talking about the person, but saying, hey, I think you want to touch base here. And also thinking of that as an opportunity to potentially build the relationship with that person. Catherine's position as EVP, she's got a lot of peers and also people that report to her. So, and she's leading, whether she calls them peers or not, that she is leading them as well in those responses.
Maybe just even asking them for coffee or to go for a walk and giving them the space to talk about something if they want to. And sometimes just getting out of the situation for, even if it's a 5-10 minute walk around the block, can just like totally help to reset perspective. So I think with coworkers, there's sometimes that fine line, right, of like what they want to share and maybe what they feel they need to share. And so just giving them the space to do so if they feel comfortable.
100%. Yep. I love that. Go for a walk or change of scenery is so good. Our book of the quarter was Eat That Frog. And Jennifer brought up Mel Robbins says, just take a 10-minute walk. Just do it. Now that maybe it's going to be spring, maybe we'll see. Jury's still out on that, or walk around your office, get some steps in. One, exercise is great for your brain. That change of scenery is also great. So I love that. What about if you're experiencing it from a leader position? Like your leader, you feel like your leader is disengaged. Like get a little bit more uncomfortable. I would still encourage you to practice Matthew 18, just have a conversation with them. Like, I've noticed this, whatever, however soft you want to do that, you certainly can. And it might open up a deeper conversation, and all of these opportunities, all of these things are just opportunities to serve them well. So do it, just do it. That's the Nike slogan, and I think it is very appropriate. Okay, what about an employee? I touched it. What about an employee noticing a direct supervisor? Because that happens, you can tell, kind of thing, that those things go on, and just having open conversations. You'd be surprised at what people will share when you ask them. So, what other questions? Who has a question on quiet quitting? Well, it can be on anything, I guess.
I have a question, Sarah.
Yeah.
When you were talking at the first slide or two about the signs of quiet quitting, and you were talking about how it also, there's that kind of fine line between that and maybe pulling back from overworking yourself, or, you have employees that have put in that 100 and whatever percent and are now like, okay, I need to actually get some work-life balance, and it's a healthy decision. How, from a perspective, if you're not in those conversations or have that close enough relationship to know that's what's going on, how can you distinguish the difference of the signs between quiet quitting and making a healthy resolution of boundaries and work-life balance?
I love that question, because it's not as easy as saying it directly. So my opinion on that would be, from a quiet quitting perspective, it's more of a disengagement, and from a healthy boundaries perspective, they're still excited to be at work. So the conversation to get there might not be an exciting conversation like, hey, I have 2 little kids. I really just need to leave my laptop at the office. And that's just the season I'm in. And that's a very mature conversation to have. And then while they're there from 8 to 5, they're really giving it their all, and you can kind of distinguish that. What I would encourage to do, if you're on like this, like a leadership team and you're noticing it from somebody that's on a different team and you're curious about that behavior, is just ask for communication in regards to that. Like, hey, we also, common sense is not common, right? So keeping that in mind, because it's like, for us, we have Betsy, who is like our executive assistant. So she gets lots of random stuff, which was the situation that she was in yesterday. Guess what? She also has 4 kids. And raising 4 kids is very difficult. That's like 4 full-time jobs on top of your job. So giving grace in those moments, but also that fine line of expectation of like, okay, but you have to tell us when you can't, right? Because we can't give you grace if you're not. So it's a communication of that. And then we also have people on our team who don't have kids, so they don't quite understand that sometimes she's going to have to pull back. And we, as an organization, so that's my job as the leader, to make sure that cross-departmental communication is happening, and that some people, so the one of the larger organizations I work with, there's like the accounting team who sees everything and has all these thoughts, and then let's just say HR. So HR gets to do all the fluffy stuff, right? The fun stuff, and accounting is doing all the less fun stuff. I'm an accountant, so I can say that. And there might be some animosity there, like, why is the HR team not showing up? Whatever. Well, you don't know that they were on the phone till 9 p.m. talking about an employment issue. So let's give grace here. Let's be open about those things that are going on, so that we can really temper those stories that we're telling ourselves. And that's why Crucial Conversations is on that book list, is because in Crucial Conversations, the language is there in that book is, what is the story I'm telling myself? Because if I see somebody coming in late, I might be telling myself that they're lazy, that they're quiet quitting, that they don't value, if they come late to a meeting, if they don't value our time. But there might be a whole bunch of other things going on. And that's why if we don't talk about it, then we create a toxicity, this undercurrent that exists, and that's not healthy either. So I kind of roundabouted your question, Catherine. That was not direct, but you're good. Any other questions in the final minute? Okay, well, I appreciate you all spending the last hour with me learning about quiet quitting, the tools to re-engage your teams. Drew will send out the slides and a couple of the resources that we found too, so that you can use these tools. If you want to learn even more, by all means, reach out to us. We have a bunch of these things just sitting in our library, and I hope you have a fantastic Wednesday afternoon. See ya.